right, welcome everyone. My name is Marit van Dijk. As you can tell from my last name, I'm from the Netherlands. And I'm here today to fill in for Tom Coles, who was supposed to do the closing keynote, but couldn't make it. He did the same talk at JSpring, a Dutch conference, and it's really, really great and very inspiring. So I highly recommend that you watch the recording to be inspired by his learning through tinkering. I'm here today to talk to you about collaborating on open source software. As you might have noticed, open source is everywhere. So by show of hands, who uses open source software at work? I think that's pretty much everyone, right? And of those people, who contributes to open source software? That is not a lot. That is a problem. We're going to talk about that. Because it would be good if we can get more people to help out. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Fair warning, I've given this talk before, throughout 2018, 19, and 20. And pretty much each time I've given the talk, I've received messages from people who said, hey, after your talk, I did my first open source contribution. So I'm really hoping that at least one of you will send me a message later saying that you've done the same. And actually my favorite, this was at a conference where I met Simone for the first time. I was talking to an ex-coworker of mine who happened to have the same manager as I did at the time. And we were talking, I'm like, hey, someone told me that you contribute to, or the manager told me you contribute to Katie Lind. And he's like, yes, yes. And he sort of walked over and he's like, actually, you know what? It's since I saw your talk 2 years ago that I thought, oh, I have some energy to do some programming in the evenings. I want to contribute, and he is now a Katie Lind maintainer. And I was like, oh, who cut the onions? That is really cool. So, you know, if we can get more people to help out, that would be good. So we're going to talk about why would you contribute to open source software. We're going to talk about what can you do. Obviously, you can help write code, but there are lots of other things that you can do as well. And we're going to talk about how do you contribute to open source software. So let's start with why do you contribute to open source software? Or why do people contribute to open source software? One reason might be altruistic. You want to give back to the community, you want to help out a project, you like using a certain library and you want to help them out. That's great. You might also do so for more selfish reasons. You want to learn new things, practice your skills, and you want to do so with other people that you can learn from. That's also a valid reason. To be honest, my reason to get started was a combination of both. I'd been learning new things by doing coding challenges online, which is a lot of fun, but I wanted to practice in a more useful way, maybe write some code that other people could actually use. I know people that started because they wanted to scratch an itch, so they had a problem that they wanted to fix or a feature that they wanted to get out, and that's how they started contributing. And I think that that's how Rien, who is one of the core contributors or maintainers of Cucumber JVM, I think that's how he got started. He found a bug, he wanted to fix it, and now he ended up maintaining it. Another reason might be that you want to build a portfolio and show what you can do, especially if you're coming from, as we were just discussing outside, if you're coming from a less traditional computer science background, you might need the help to show what you can do. And another reason is you might benefit in terms of a network of meeting people that you can learn with and that can help you or you can help them. And I know that I met a lot of amazing people through working on Cucumber. But there might be other reasons as well. Of course, there might be reasons that you don't contribute to open source software, because it can be quite scary, especially if you're maybe new, you still want to learn things, you're maybe a little bit impressed by people who are really smart, writing really exciting things. You're like, what do I have to offer? You might have practical reasons, work-life balance. You know, if you have children or other dependents, or even hobbies outside of tech, which is actually quite healthy to have. So you might not have the time to spend 40 plus hours behind a computer, which is definitely not healthy to do. So, and you might have legal reasons that you can't contribute to open source. I don't know about Romania, but in the Netherlands, a standard employment contract will usually say that anything that you produce is the property of the company, any code that you produce. So you might not be allowed legally to contribute to open source projects because you don't own that intellectual property to give away. I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. But it's something to think about. And for example, at bol.com, which was the company I worked for previously, which is an online retail platform in the Netherlands and Belgium, we used a lot of open source. Our standard contract said we weren't allowed to contribute, but for anybody who wanted to, they could sign an addendum to their contract, so an addition stating you are allowed to contribute to open source projects in accordance with some procedures by the company. So for those of us who wanted to, we could sign that and still contribute to open source software. But keep in mind that there are legal ramifications, and you need to consider whether you are allowed by your company to spend time on open source, to use your machine, your computer from work to do so, or whether you need to do it on your own machine. Finally, there are people who may have had bad experience trying to contribute to open source. Not all communities are equally welcoming and friendly. I've had a friend tell me, after hearing another version of this talk, that she tried to contribute to a project where she cloned the project, she tried to build it, and she couldn't get it to build. She figured out why, and then she added that to the documentation of how to build the project, and her contribution was rejected because they said, well, that's obvious. Clearly it wasn't, but yeah, at least now we know this is not a project that I may want to work on. I don't know which project it was, by the way. So the first project that I contributed to was Cucumber. The reason that I started working on Cucumber is I started using it when I joined bol.com in 2017, and I really liked using it. And I had been sort of thinking about wanting to contribute to open source software, so I thought, okay, here's a project that I like, let's see if I can help them out. And I really lucked out, because the reason that I worked on it for so long is the community. The people were really, really friendly. Really helpful, especially Rien in the beginning helped find issues that were good for someone new to the project to work on, so that were small and doable. But also, when I started, I didn't know a lot about Git, and I made a mistake and merged something that shouldn't have gotten merged. And I was mortified, and I thought, oh, they'll want nothing more to do with me, they won't want me to contribute. But in fact, they were really, really nice and helped to fix the problem, including Aslak, who's the creator of Cucumber, was super nice about it and was like, oh, we'll fix it, no problem, please continue. And me being who I am, spent the entire weekend doing Git tutorials and now creating Git content. So that's, you know, in terms of an example of things that you learn from open source and then use at work. And in one of my previous teams, I would be the go-to person to help when people messed up with Git, or how do we do this? Like, yay, this is something that I can bring to the team. Let me fix that for you. So yeah, I really liked that. But also I really appreciated how friendly they were, and they were like, you know, we'll figure it out. Let's fix that together. So like I said, there are different ways to contribute. Obviously, code, because we're talking about open source software. So one of the things that you can do is fix bugs, even if they look really cute. You know, you can fix bugs that you find yourself, or if you want to help out the project, fix bugs that other people have reported. One of my first contributions was a bug fix on Cucumber, where, as I spoke about before, I was able to first create the tests to reproduce the problem, which is something that I love when bug fixing, because it helps me verify that I understand the problem. Then write the code to fix that bug. to make sure that it works as intended, and then make sure that it stays dead because I have the test. Another thing that you can do is refactor. Might not be everyone's favorite activity, but I'm a weirdo and I love refactoring. I love removing code that we no longer need. I love removing dependencies we no longer need, and I love making things more consistent and easier to read and easier to use for other people. So again, a small example is we have some Kotlin code, and as I was learning Kotlin and more idiomatic Kotlin, I was able to rewrite it into more idiomatic Kotlin, because if you first start writing Kotlin and you come from Java, you end up writing pretty much Java in Kotlin, and as you become more familiar, you will be able to be more idiomatic. Another thing I end up doing a lot is fixing typos, because typos bug me, and I'm usually the person to notice them. Apparently I'm the only one, I don't know. Simone too? Yeah. No? No? So I'm the person who notices the typos and fixes the typos. So I was playing around with PyTest, which is a mutation testing framework, and I noticed a typo in one of the error messages, like something really trivial. Like, okay, here's a PR for you to fix that. And he's like, okay, thanks. And of course, you can add new features. This is on my to-do list. Still want to add a new feature somewhere, sometime. Maybe next year. I don't think this year is doable. Obviously, I love tests. I had a whole talk about testing earlier today. So another thing that you can do is add tests to a project. One of my first contributions was adding a test to Cucumber JVM that actually closed an issue, because adding the test to reproduce the issue showed that it had been fixed already in the past. Obviously, it was an old issue, but somewhere in between it got fixed. If you use open source software, you'll know that occasionally vulnerabilities are found, especially in the Java ecosystem over the past year. We had some fun with Log4Shell and Spring4Shell and updating everything, and I see your pain in your face, and I'm right there with you. But occasionally, so updating dependencies to the projects that you're using is also something that you can do. And I did some of that for some GraphQL projects that we were using, that were bringing in transitive dependencies that had known vulnerabilities. Which is also, it's a really small PR. You can quickly do this. Of course, nowadays we have lots of bots that can do this for you. If you're using Java, there are several options: Dependabot, Renovate, or Sneak Open Source. So you might add one of these bots to a project if that's what they want, because before you do this, be aware that those bots will start creating PRs, which will create noise for the maintainers. So before adding a bot to a project, make sure that they want to have that. Another thing that you can do is review PRs. You can help out the maintainers by finding things in the review, but also you will learn a lot by doing the reviews, and you'll familiarize yourself with the project. And then setting yourself up for doing other contributions. But there are other things that you can do that aren't code. And I want to mention this book by Vicky Brasseur called Forge Your Future with Open Source. If you want to know more about how open source came to be, and some of the things about licenses and all of the different roles in way more detail than I can give you in 45 minutes, I highly recommend this book. But I especially like this bit, where she says, please don't feel you have nothing to contribute to free and open source software if you're not a programmer. And that is absolutely true. There are many ways that you can help. You can help the community. You can help by answering questions that other users have, either on Stack Overflow, or by talking about it, or by writing about it, or by going in the official support channels. Like Cucumber has a Slack where you can go if you want help. Kotlin has a Slack where you can go if you want to help others or get help getting started. There might be a Discord or Gitter or any other kind of communication, official support channels where you can go if you want help with a project or if you want to help others use a project. So I've been quite active on the Cucumber Slack and also on the issues. Cucumber uses GitHub issues for bug reports or pull requests, so not for questions because they have other support channels for that. But I was able to answer a question and they were really helpful or really nice about it, even though I closed their issue and told them, you know, don't do this, basically. So if you end up answering the same question over and over, you might want to consider adding that to the documentation because it might not be there or it might not be clear. Speaking of which, documentation can usually use a lot of help. People are giggling on the front row, thanks, Co. Because we all love to complain about how bad the documentation is, but I don't see a lot of people helping out writing the documentation. I'm one of those idiots that does that. So I was doing a Spring tutorial. Spring tutorials are really good, by the way, but there was like a tiny step missing that confused me for a little bit. I'm like, okay, let me just add one line and fix that and make it clear for whoever the next person is that does this tutorial. Or on Cucumber, I added a page on testable architecture that was based on a talk that Aslak did. But I summarized that for the documentation. He was like, okay, great, that's exactly what I meant. So that's really nice. You can help edit documentation. This is one of my favorite PRs that we got from Carol Strand to make the documentation more inclusive. There's entire talks on how to make documentation more inclusive, but some pointers are, don't say, just do this, simply do that. It's easy. Imagine you're having trouble implementing this and you go to the documentation to help you figure it out and they're like, oh, it's easy, you just do this. Well, if it was easy, I wouldn't be here. So, you know, think about how someone might be reading this. Super simple, fix some dead links. I was reading Docker documentation, link led nowhere, small PR. Also for documentation, reviewing the PRs is super useful, and that's even maybe easier to do than reviewing code, because for code sometimes you need context. Olle is the person who usually reviews or reviewed my documentation PRs, and we've never met in real life, but he reviewed pretty much every PR that I did, and always found small things to make it better. And I really love that type of collaboration where, you know, together you make it better than one of you could do by themselves. Even if you don't follow official procedures, you can still provide feedback to a project, either on the documentation or the project itself. Is it easy to use? Because I know that if I'm writing the documentation, I know what I'm trying to say, but at some point I don't know whether it's clear. So it's really nice to have someone who's maybe new to read it and to say, yes, I understand what you're trying to say, or yes, I'm able to follow this tutorial and get the same results, or things like that. Also, if you find issues in an open source project, report them. If you're not sure if it's a bug, ask. I mean, I'm sure that goes also for projects at work that you're working with. I know as a developer, I much prefer someone to be like, hey, this doesn't work the way I thought it would. I'm using your API, can you help me out? Am I doing something wrong, or did I find a bug? So if you're not sure if it's a bug or maybe a misunderstanding, just ask. Before you file an issue, check that it's not already been filed, so you don't end up with lots of duplicates and noise. Provide the relevant information. As developers, we have some idea what that might be, what information they might need to help triage your issue and fix the bug. And occasionally you might be asked to create a minimal, complete, verifiable example. So, you know, you probably can't provide your entire work project and be like, this is where I have a problem. So they might ask you to make a small example that reproduces the problem that you have. This is also a really good exercise in narrowing down the problem that you have. Because I've tried to do this in the past where I thought I knew what the problem was and it wasn't that, so we had to try something else. You can help analyze issues, trying to reproduce them or add information that might be missing, or maybe even add a test that reproduces it even if you don't know how to fix it. Testing, again, is something that you can do. When Rien and Aslak were working on adding cucumber expressions, so I don't know if anybody's familiar with cucumber, and in the past it used, you can still use regular expressions, but then you have to know what the regular expression is for a string or an int or a whatever. So several years ago they added cucumber expressions where you can just write in curly braces int or string. And I did some testing when they were working on that, on how to use it and whether it worked, and found some bugs both in code and in the documentation of explaining how to use that. And there might even be other work around a project that you can do. They might need a designer, they might need a logo for their website, they might need a website or someone to help on that. They might need a product owner to help prioritize issues. So there are lots of things that you can do, and if you don't know, again, ask, because for sure there will be things that you can do that aren't even written down in issues or anywhere. Sorry. Also keep in mind that projects mostly run on volunteers. Most projects do not have a company that is paying people to work on it. People are doing this in their spare time. So be nice, be kind, because they get a lot of negative comments about how is this even possible, why isn't this fixed yet? It's not fixed because they don't owe you anything, they're not getting paid. So I don't know if money is the solution. There are ways to sponsor open source and open source projects. There are several ways. Cucumber uses Open Collective, where you can donate money to Cucumber. It goes into a fund, and they can use that, and they will say what they use it on. There's the Software Foundation Conservancy that spans several projects. There's Patreon. Some people you're able to sponsor on Patreon. For example, Sam Aaron, who created Sonic Pi, which if you're not familiar, look that up, it's amazing. He wrote a program where you can live code music, and it's really cool. He did a talk and a demo at JSpring or JFall, probably JFall in the Netherlands, the Dutch Java conference. And I'm just amazed that someone would think of something like that, so it's really cool. And I think there are other similar projects, but as far as I know, you can sponsor him on Patreon. So then you know that it goes directly to him. Tidelift is another company that you can give money and they then spread it around over projects, but then it's unclear what projects they sponsor. However, Brian Vermeer, who's a developer advocate for Sneak, tweeted recently that it's really hard to know how we can sponsor open source projects. What if I specifically want to fund this particular project or pay these particular developers for working on it? And I had an ex-coworker of mine who was a Log4j maintainer who had a really rough December last year, did a thread as well on how hard it is for them to get money because they're part of the Maven Foundation, and then any money that goes there, how does it end up with them? Only a few people are currently active, so it's just really hard. And because there's an XKCD for everything, there are projects who might be maintained by someone by themselves, thanklessly. This is sometimes called the bus factor. So, how many people need to get hit by a bus for this project to no longer be maintained? I don't really want to think about how many people should get hit by a bus. That doesn't seem a nice thing. So I prefer the term lottery factor. I don't know where I got it from, but how many people need to win the lottery and move to a tropical island, or given the state of the world, probably a mountaintop would be a better choice, and no longer have to write code for this project to go unmaintained. So let's say that you've decided, okay, I want to help out. Where do I start? So first you need to find a project to work on. Now, this might be a project that you use, which if there's a project that you use that you want to work on, I would highly recommend that, because you already use it, you're more or less familiar with it, even if it's as a user and not the internal workings of it. But it's a project that you use and that you like, so therefore you already care about it. So that would be a good start if possible. If not, there are a bunch of websites where you can go to find projects that are good for beginners. So there's a GitHub repo called Awesome for Beginners. There's Up for Grabs, First Timers Only. And in the month of October, there's Hacktoberfest, where if you get 4 PRs merged, you should get a t-shirt, although I never got last year's t-shirt, as did a friend of mine, never got his. So if you want to participate this year, you can go to the website and register. And also, if you want to contribute, but not necessarily through Hacktoberfest, they have a bunch of good resources. So with more background information on what is open source, how does it work, but also places like First Timers Only to find issues to contribute to. Also, I know that Spring has first-timer-only issues that are specifically for people who haven't contributed to Spring before. And that will be, so it will be smaller things that the maintainers could do themselves, but instead they created an issue with enough information for a first-timer to do it. So lots of projects are thinking of ways of how to get new contributors. Cucumber have a new contributors ensemble every week on Wednesday evening that is live streamed on Twitch and that you can join if you're interested. If you find a project that you want to contribute to, there are several things to look for in the project. So look at the README that will hopefully describe some information on what the project is, what it's for, and some background information. Look for a contributing, or sometimes called hacking, document that specifies how can you contribute to this project. Obviously, an open source project needs a license, but there are different kinds of licenses, and if you're interested in that, the book I mentioned has more information on that. So is it a license that you agree with? You might look for a code of conduct. If you care about communities being welcoming and open to everyone, look for a project that has a code of conduct that reflects that. There might be style guides to use or code styles or for the documentation as well. We had some, please write this way and not that way for some of the things. And certain projects might require you to sign a contributor license agreement, which is a document basically saying, I give away the intellectual property of this code that I'm contributing to the project. For legal reasons, otherwise copyright gets complicated. Again, not a lawyer. And if you don't know, but you want to contribute, ask. Like I said, there's plenty of stuff that isn't written down anywhere for you to find, but that could really use some help. So next, pick a task. Of course, you might want to fix your own problem if you found a bug or want to add a feature. Otherwise, the project might have issues that are marked as good first issue or first timer only or help wanted. So look for those labels. Again, ask if you're not sure. You might need to set up some tools depending on whether the project you want to contribute to uses the same stuff you already use, like Git or a JDK or Docker or whatever. You'll need to clone the project, so you fork it on GitHub, meaning you copy it to your profile on GitHub or GitLab or whatever you're using. You clone it to your machine, and you'll need to set up multiple remotes. because if you're just starting out, you won't have permission to push to the original project. So if there are any updates to the original project, you'll need to fetch those. And if you want to push your changes, you have to push them to your fork and then do the PR from the fork to the original. If you clone the project, make sure that you can build it. This is a great tip, regardless of any new project that you're working on, also at work. Make sure that you can build it before you start working on it, because if later you can't, make sure you know whether that's your problem or it was already there, just to save yourself lots and lots of debugging time. Yeah. If you found something to work on and you've discussed with them, work on your contribution and at a certain point submit a pull request. You might receive feedback on that pull request, which might be small things or might be big things. Hopefully you've talked to them. Does this bug still need fixing? Is this the right type of solution? Is this a feature that you want in your project? Because if they accept it, they'll have to maintain it. So do communicate beforehand before spending a lot of time on something that they may not want and they might not accept, but hopefully your contribution will get accepted. My first contribution, as far as I know, was August 2017, yay. But be aware that it might get rejected, and it might get rejected for good reasons. There's a blog post by Jesse Frizzell about no is temporary, yes is forever. This is an old tweet. There was some drama with Slack who discontinued something. I don't remember all of the details, but it's really hard once a project accepts a feature, it's hard for them to deprecate that at some point because people will be upset because they're using it. So if you really want a feature in a project, but it's not in line with their vision or it's not something that they want to support long term, it might get rejected. So that's why I'm saying discuss with them before you do all the work and they reject it. So make sure to align with the project that the work that you're doing is wanted. Also, make sure that the project is even maintained so you're not trying to fix something on an unmaintained repository, all of these things. So the TLDR, or too long, didn't read, contributing to open source doesn't have to take a lot of time. I mean, it can if you want to, or you fall down a rabbit hole, like some of us. It doesn't have to take a lot of programming skill. There are lots of other things you can do if you're not a brilliant programmer or you're just starting out. If you want to contribute but you don't know how, ask. Any project that would like new contributors will be happy to tell you, oh, here, maybe this is something you can do. What's your background? What are you good at? Maybe that is something you can do. So please go and collaborate. And here's the page with the slides. Thank you. I had 2 days to prepare this, and this is the first time I did a keynote and the first time that I did 2 talks in 1 day. So I survived. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for closing the day. And of course, I would like to thank you that you stayed till this hour at the conference. Of course, I would like to thank again our sponsors that they made this event possible. And I really appreciate that you take this time to invest in your future self and become better and better. And of course, maybe we'll see you on the stage next year here or in Bucharest or in some other place in Europe. So don't be shy and just send a talk to the CFP, to a CFP, to any CFP. And yeah, who knows? Maybe, yeah, I think this would be a good topic next time from the speakers to share their experience how they actually got from a developer to a speaker, and what was the path from their desk to the stage. Okay, this is kind of the end of this conference day. We will have an unconference tomorrow, so those of you that have a U on the badge, we will expect you tomorrow. It's the first time when we do an unconference, so fingers crossed. And I'm sure it will be nice. We will have a kind of relaxed atmosphere where anyone can propose a subject, to ask questions or speak about a subject. And yeah, what can go wrong? So, thank you again for being with us. And I expect you next year here in Cluj or in Bucharest or some other event. Andra is asking me to thank again the sponsors and the speakers for being with us and help us create a wonderful event. Thank you.